Hi, this is Ken McCarthy, and I'm very excited today for a whole bunch of reasons. This is our first call actually in a series to promote our fall seminars. We're doing a beginner's boot camp in Chicago, November 8th and 9th, and a system intensive in London, November 15th and 16th. I've been trying to get back to London since 2004, and I'm very glad to be heading back there. I can't imagine a better guest to have for this call. And let me just get right to the point here. I've been watching the Internet marketing world since before there was an Internet marketing world. And I've trained, at this point now, directly hundreds of people, and indirectly, I guess at this point, it's tens of thousands of people. And I've watched some people make it. I've watched some people make it spectacularly. I've watched some people struggle. I've seen some people not make it. And after years of watching this, I can pretty much conclusively say I know why people succeed in this field, and I know why they don't. And it actually boils down to something rather simple. And when you hear what the reason is, and you then appreciate the guest that we're going to have today, you're going to be very excited. What is the reason that some people succeed so spectacularly on the Internet and others don't? It boils down to this, and I've been saying this I think for quite a while now. This is at least 94, and I guess I haven't gotten the message fully across, and I'm going to try again today to get it across. The Internet and Internet marketing is a subset. It's a smaller piece of something bigger, and that bigger thing is called direct marketing. Direct marketing has been with us now for well over 100 years. It includes things like catalog sales. It includes things like direct mail. It includes things like infomercials and direct response television commercials. There have been billions and billions and billions of dollars spent over the last century plus on this particular form of advertising. I dare say some of the finest minds of our age have applied themselves to mastering this art. And people that want to learn direct marketing are very fortunate, because it just so happens that some really fantastic practitioners have also invested time in becoming educators. And I want to just list some of the people who you should be familiar with. I think starting with Maxwell Sackheim, best known for the Book of the Month Club, but he did a lot of other things. John Caples, Tested Advertising Methods. David Ogilvy, who wrote a number of books and brought direct marketing principles to the ad agency business. Dick Benson, the great American direct mail practitioner. Vic Schwab, who was an associate of Maxwell Sackheim and a fantastic copywriter. Gary Bencivenga, the most effective direct mail copywriter of the last 25 years in terms of results. And Gary Halbert, an entrepreneur, and a fantastic educator and a very capable direct marketer as well. And these guys all write very well. They know their subject. They're in love with the subject, and they've produced a lot of great material. And here's what I like to break things down to formulas to simplify them. So let me give you the formula, and then let me introduce our guest, and you'll see immediately how he's going to be able to help you tremendously. Here's my formula. For every 1 unit of energy that you put into learning something about the Internet, whether it's Google AdWords or conversion or tracking or testing or SEO, I want you to put in 10 units of effort to learn direct marketing principles. All right? So in other words, if you're spending an hour puzzling over something complicated in Internet technology, spend 10 hours reading some of the direct marketing classics, some of the authors I mentioned, and then the work of the author that we're going to talk with in a moment. A 10-to-1 ratio. And I can't think of a case of anybody who's ever done well or very well in Internet marketing that didn't follow this ratio. It is terribly easy to get caught up in the minutia and the esoterica of small things related to the technology of the Internet. And I've seen people get lost in the maze. I've seen people load their hard drives up with PDFs and MP3s and tutorials and you name it. They know everything about everything related to the Internet, and internet technology, and they can't make a dime. In contrast, I've seen people, and I'm kind of one of them, who really has sort of a shaky grasp on the technology of the internet, and yet it does very, very well. And in every case, you'll find the people that are doing very well on the internet have invested in a deep and broad understanding of this thing called direct marketing. They've learned enough internet technology to execute on their direct marketing ideas, okay, but they haven't gotten bogged down in all the details of internet marketing. And we could run the list of names of people. Someone that just pops to mind, one of our students, Lloyd Irvin, 5 years ago, making $0 on the internet. This year, approaching $10 million a year in sales. What is his secret? He is an ardent student of direct marketing. So today we have someone who really belongs in the tradition of John Caples and David Ogilvy and Gary Bencivenga. He's one of the powerhouses of the direct marketing industry, particularly and is particularly well known in his native country, which happens to be the UK. And his name is Drayton Bird. Welcome, Drayton.
Good afternoon, Ken, or good morning over there.
Right, and for me it's morning, and for Drayton it's the afternoon. I'm going to ask you, Drayton, if you would, to tell people two things. Number one, I'm always curious how people discovered direct marketing, how they stumbled across it, and then two, just a little bit about your history briefly, and then we'll get right to content. But your history in direct marketing, so people appreciate where you're at in the sort of the hierarchy of the history.
Okay, I started out as a journalist, then I went into advertising because I was making no money in journalism. And when I went into advertising, I very quickly noticed that there were two types of client. There was the client who ran the ads that they liked, or their wives liked, or their friends liked. And it didn't really matter because nobody measured the results. And then there was the other kind of client who were selling things like sewing machines door to door. They lived or died on results. And I thought, I really don't want to be judged by somebody's wife. I would like to be judged by the customer. I don't want to live in the sort of anarchy of ignorance. I'd like to be doing what I do, knowing what my efforts are producing in real terms. So I really got interested in all these people who wanted to get results. And I was very successful in advertising very young. By the time I was 25, I was the creative director of quite a significant agency in London, about 80-odd people. And I started trying to get people to test advertising where they could measure the results. And I got some very good results from doing that. And I eventually was offered a job working in a mail order business. And in that business I met a lot of people who, one or two are quite legendary, for instance, Gene Schwartz, great copywriter. I worked with him. He offered me a job. And I said, I don't want to compete with you. I don't think I could even, stand the candle.
I had no idea. And I was fortunate enough to correspond with Gene and learn quite a bit from him. And our listeners, especially my system grads and system club members, will be very familiar with Gene and his work. We've spent a lot of time making sure people know about what Gene contributed. No, remarkable. I had no idea, Drayton. Okay.
No, I was also offered a job by a guy called Joe Carbo, who I think wrote one of the greatest headlines ever, which is copied frequently, The Lazy Man's Way to Get Rich.
Right.
And I also worked with a guy who was the founder of the Grolier Society, whose name I can't remember. I wrote some copy for him. Anyhow, I really didn't know what I was doing. And you know what, in those days, there was no such thing as direct marketing. There was mail order and direct mail. And I left the advertising agency business and tried repeatedly and with massive lack of success to make money on my own. And, there is no teacher-like experience, especially failure. We learn nothing from success. We only learn from failure. And eventually, I started businesses. I lost money in businesses. I did very, very stupid things. In fact, I've been doing speeches throughout Europe in the last 3 months about just a few of the stupid things I did.
Well, that's a good trick. So you're making money telling people about stupid things you've done. That's a pretty good.
To some extent, yes, that's probably true. Yeah, I'm actually doing a huge, great thing in Europe in about 2 weeks, and that's one of the things I'm talking about. This is a whole week. Be bored by Drayton Bird and his friends for a week. So eventually, realising that I was totally incompetent at anything else, I decided to start a direct marketing agency, and this was at the time when the phrase direct marketing was just coming into use. It was coined by Lester Wunderman, and it really was a synthesis of direct mail and mail order. Mm-hmm. And because I had spent an amazing amount of time studying, I've always been a great student. I still study every day what people are doing, in the hope that eventually I'll get it right. We were very successful very quickly. I mean, we started out with one or two handicaps in our agency. Number one, none of us had any money. The only difference between me and my two partners was that I owed a lot of money to the tax man. In fact, I'd been living under a false name for 7 years.
Wow.
I think a bit like Gary Halbert, actually. I think he had a bit of a checkered career.
Okay.
But within 3.5 years, we were the biggest direct marketing agency in England, and we were constantly being approached by the big advertising agency groups to buy us. And eventually, I was rung up by David Ogilvy himself, who I'd written something nice about him in a trade publication. And he said, "Oh, that was very kind of you." And that was it. And I turned to my partners who were listening to this. So, who are you talking to? I said, "It's David Ogilvy." I was very impressed. And then the next day, the chairman of his agency in England rang me up and said, "That was a very nice piece you wrote about David. I mean, could I buy you lunch?" And I turned to my partner and said, "Ogilvy's want to buy us." And what happened was that Ogilvy had been trying to break into the UK market for years, very unsuccessfully. In fact, I had actually turned down a job with them because I didn't think they knew what they were doing. And so we sold our business to Ogilvy, and we put the two together. And then I was very lucky. I got on very well with David, and I got on very well with the people who were running the group, because David wasn't actively running the group, although he was very active. And they put me on the worldwide board, and I used to go around the world preaching the gospel of direct marketing. So that's how I got into making a bit of money out of direct marketing, through serial incompetence.
Okay.
And a bit of luck.
Whatever works. I just want to maybe do a replay of that narrative, because I want to make sure everybody listening really appreciates what you accomplished there. You started in a field with no knowledge other than your book knowledge and some experience. You had no money. In fact, apparently you had less than no money. Your partners were in no better position. Within 3 years, which is not much time at all in the scope of things, you built the most enviable direct marketing practice in the whole country of England. And David Ogilvy, and some people will recognize that name on this call, some people won't. For those that don't recognize that name, David was the man. He was, the superlatives, just are inadequate. He also started with very slim resources, and ended up at the time building the biggest, I believe it was the biggest ad agency of the time. But
about the second biggest, actually.
Second biggest, okay.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, we're talking worldwide. And also his biggest contribution was to bring the discipline and the learnings and the experience of direct marketing, of the mail order marketers. Particularly, I think John Caples had a big influence on him. He
told me over dinner one night that John Caples had influenced him and his brother-in-law, and very few people know this, but his brother-in-law was another man who offered me a job. His name was Rosser Reeves. He was the man who invented the USP. And they were having dinner one night, and apparently Rosser said, "Let's face it, we learned all we know from John Caples." And I turned to David, and I said, "Well, let's face it, I learned all I know from you and Rosser Reeves, so I'm a second-hand thief." In fact, I had read John Caples a lot, although the book that's influenced me most, by far, is Claude Hopkins' Scientific Advertising, which I have on my website, and I always give away free to people, and many other people do, because it's the shortest book not just on direct marketing, but on advertising and marketing generally. It's the shortest and it's the best. And the problem with, touching on what you were saying earlier, what stops people making a lot of money is a failure to understand that what we are talking about is extremely simple. In fact, you're talking about saying online marketing is a subset of direct marketing. It probably is, but I mean, I was being interviewed on Indian television a few years ago, and somebody, the interviewer said, "So, how do you define direct marketing? Or how do you define online marketing?" And I said, "It is accelerated direct marketing. The only difference really is that what you used to take you say 6 weeks to test something in direct mail or in the press and get the results, whereas you can in the morning have an idea at 9 o'clock, and by 1 o'clock you'll know whether it's worked or not. And I totally agree with you, Ken. It's nothing to do with technique. I don't want to know how the bloody hell a car engine works. I can't even drive a car. I've actually sold cars for Mercedes, Audi, lots and lots of brands all over the world. But I can't drive. I'm not interested in driving. I'm interested in why people want what they want. And when it comes to the internet, there are so many excuses to make things complicated. There's a great incentive amongst people who are selling information about this sort of thing to make it sound complicated, because if it sounds complicated, obviously it's valuable. But it's not complicated. All marketing is extraordinarily simple. I don't care whether it's online or not online, or direct or not direct. It is bringing two things together. It is bringing together the thing that you want to sell, the service or the product, with the customer that wants to buy it. It doesn't really matter. I mean, to give an interesting example, actually, this morning a client rang me up, and my partner and I wrote one paragraph in an email, and they're a retailer. They're not direct marketers, which goes out to their list of people, and that got £50,000 worth of sales. Probably about less than 50 words, yeah? Wow. And it was just about bringing the customer and the product together. That's all you're trying to do, whatever you're doing, yeah? So people get confused with the tactics. They get confused with the minutiae of AdWords and so on. I can always get somebody to tell me that. Yeah, I think you've got to rise above all this sort of thing. If you want to be a mechanic, be a mechanic. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, then you've got to understand the context of what you're doing. And that's the real problem. That's a digression, by the way.
I think it hits the nail on the head. You've gathered a lot of material over the years, a lot of experience and a lot of advice, and I've been reading some of the things you've written, and a couple of things jumped out at me, and I wonder if we could talk about them. You talk about the seven deadly sins of direct marketing, and you're speaking in this particular piece largely about direct mail, but I think it applies to email 100%.
I think this is a video I think I did, isn't it? I think so. I've written a piece about it and I've done a video as well. And
So look for the video too, guys. But let's talk a bit about this. So, because I think it's one of the central ideas that just seems to be completely overlooked in 99% of the internet marketing education I see, and I think it's one of the key critical issues. And if you get it wrong, you can't make any progress. And if you get it right, you can succeed spectacularly. So what are these? What is the issue? And what are these seven deadly?
I have. You know what? I don't even have them in front of me. I can tell you some of them.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. Without even looking at what you've written, you talk about what's required for and you use direct mail as the example. What's required for a direct mail piece to work? And some people again get caught up in thinking they need to do all kinds of superhuman fancy things. But what I loved about your presentation is you talk about the simple things that people overlook. For instance, you raise this issue of junk mail, and you point out that, well, you know what, maybe that phrase is accurate because too many marketers are sending out junk.
Most mail is junk. Somebody was interviewing me the other day, and I said, yeah, it's true, most mail is junk. I said, I'll tell you what, I've got news for you. Most restaurants are junk, most films are junk, most television is junk, most of everything is junk. Why are you so surprised that this is junk? The only reason that people get excited about it is that something that comes through your door with your name on it, and for that matter, this applies with equal force to email, something that comes into this very intimate space, but, you know, where you are sitting in front of your little screen, yeah?
Yep.
And does it the wrong way, will really irritate you. That's why you get excited about it. What is junk? Junk is something that has been ill-targeted. It doesn't fit into the relationship that you may or may not have with the person. If you've got no relationship with somebody, why are they talking to you? I've just done something for somebody who sells to a massive list of people who've asked to save money on this, that and the other. And what they were sending out before was a thing that said you could save £100 if you switch your bank account to us, more or less, and it was an HTML thing which somebody had spent a lot of time making look pretty. And I just said, you know, the only thing that matters about these people to start with is they're saying, why are you talking to me? And you're talking to them because they actually asked you to tell them about ways to make money, to save money, yeah? So, something so terribly simple. I just said, since you signed up to our thing to save money, then I guess you'll be interested in this. Okay. And that won the response by 70%. That's not creative. You don't have to be creative. You have to be relevant, yeah? That's the important thing.
Did you say 70%?
70%.
70%. Yeah. And so the difference was someone was trying to be clever and artistic and
they were trying to be artistic. They had not thought about the most important thing. The most important thing out of the 5 W's. Who are you talking to? Why are you talking to them? Where are you talking to them? When are they talking? Why should they do what you want? The most important thing is who are you talking to? I think Harvey McCarthy pointed out that something you know about your customer is more important than anything you know about your product. And one of the great problems with being a marketer is, quite naturally, if you're going to be any good as a marketer, you must care. You must care about your product. If you don't care about your product, you're not going to produce a good product. But you just have to step back a bit and say to yourself, my product may be wonderful, but let's start with where the money comes from, you know? The money comes from the customer. So I would say 4/5 of the time you spend on marketing should not be spent thinking about techniques or clever ideas or anything else other than the customer. Julius Rosenwald, who built up Sears Roebuck to become the world's biggest retail organization, used to say, my ambition is to stand on both sides of the counter at once. That is the trick. It's nothing to do with technique. It's to do with thinking about people, understanding people. Again, I remember, who was the guy who saved Chrysler from going broke for a bit? Wrote a book. He said something about I found very amusing in his book.
Chrysler cars?
Yeah, that was Lee Iacocca. He said something in his book which otherwise I didn't find very interesting, but he said, if you want to succeed around here, you better get on with people, because that's all we've got. It's all about people. It's not about techniques. It's not about, understanding the minutiae of this technique versus that technique and how you can get onto the list of blah, 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 It's not about that. It's about people.
So before some people develop, for lack of a better word, stage fright when it comes to sitting down to writing an ad. They sit down and they don't know what to say. And I think, and tell me what you think about this, is the reason they don't know what to say is they haven't thought through where the customer is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The first question I ask to people when I'm getting a brief, I say, listen, can you tell me something about what do these people think about you, if you have any idea? Have you communicated with them in the past? If so, what happened? That's what I want to know. The process of persuasion is astonishingly simple and extremely difficult, because it starts with saying something that the person at the other end of the message cannot disagree with. So even the most banal statement, such as if I write to a doctor and say, as a doctor, that is not exactly creative, it's very boring. But if it's true, that's something that doctor cannot disagree with. If I say, you wrote to me 3 days ago, it's true. Even if I say, I wrote to you 2 days ago, but you didn't reply, it's true. So persuasion starts from something which is true or which is believed to be true by the recipient. And then the process of persuasion is a bit like a race in the Olympics of people jumping over hurdles. The next hurdle is I have to say something else, which is also very difficult for people to disagree with. And so on until at the end I say, so let's face it, you've got nothing to lose, why don't you reply now? Yeah? And that's what it is. But it all starts with something you know that person cannot disagree with. And it can be implicit rather than explicit. The most successful advertisement in the world, according to my friend Denny Hatch, is the mailing that went out to sell the Wall Street Journal, which tells a story about two young men and how one succeeded and the other failed. Now, it wasn't explicit. It didn't explicitly say, would you like to succeed? But there was implicit in that message that you would like to be the one who succeeds, not the one who fails. So it may not be as direct as saying, I wrote to you last week. But if you don't say something that really hits a nerve, you're dead. And that starts with understanding people.
Great. And then let's let people know that this is not instant knowledge that you acquire off the top of your head or in 5 seconds. It may require some thinking and maybe some interviewing some prospects, talking with potential buyers, talking with existing buyers. This insight comes from digging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll give you an example. I'm working for a very big firm, an American firm actually, called LexisNexis, who they're biggest suppliers of information, knowledge to the legal profession in the world. And we did a mailing about 3 weeks ago. It's actually quite funny. I'm actually walking around in the room where this was put together. It was to a very small number of people. And we did everything by hand. I was actually sat here signing somebody's name for most of a day. And we put handwritten post-it notes on the mailing, and we sent it out. But one of the and despite the fact it's the worst database I've come across in many years, it probably, in the end, for an expenditure of maybe £10,000, including our fees, it'll probably produce about £1 million worth of revenue.
Wow.
Why? Because I asked a number of questions. I rang up a friend of mine who's an eminent lawyer, and I said, listen, Jeffrey, I'm doing this so-and-so and so-and-so. Will you have a look at it? And he looked at it, and he said, oh, that makes sense. I said, can you tell me how people open their mail in legal firms? He said, oh, it's very interesting. He said, they all sit round together. Ah. So that gave me the information that I needed to know, the context in which people are going to receive your message. Because what we're doing all the time, we're just surrogate salesmen. If you could afford to send out a salesman to every single prospect, why would you need to send out letters? But you can't afford to do it. A persuasive salesman is the most powerful weapon on earth. Yeah? So you're pretending to be a salesman. What does a salesman do? A salesman goes in there and he or she gauges the reaction and the attitude of the person and the kind of person he or she is talking to. And that's what you're trying to do when you write to people. You're trying to understand, what kind of person is this? How do they go about doing things? So if I know that they all sit round together. In fact, I wrote a follow-up mailing I wrote the beginning of a follow-up mailing to us the other day because I found out that one firm had got all their 10 partners together, read the letter, which is 6 pages long, and then picked up the phone and rang up LexisNexis and said, we want it.
Wow.
So I wrote a thing saying, at 9:47 on July the 18th, the 10 partners of a legal firm read a 6-page letter, picked up the phone, and then ordered something that cost them £11,000. Yeah.
Wow.
But you only know that because you ask.
Exactly.
What a lot of people do when they start to write, they spend an immense amount of time guessing.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point about direct marketing is, why guess when you can know? I mean, that's what measurement's about. But they spend a lot of time guessing, and I understand totally the fear and panic which still faces me. I've been doing this for nearly 50 years, yeah? More than 50 years, I think. I hate to think. But every time somebody says to me, can you write some copy? I go to myself, oh shit, I'm going to fail, you know. And it's the only thing that's what drives you on. The people who think they can do it easily, the people who, I'm just writing a letter, or I'm writing an email. It's not like that, you know. You've got to fear failure and try hard and be simple. Don't make it complicated. Don't worry about the technique. First of all, start thinking about the person. Then you can start think about the different ways in which you might approach these people, the kind of messages that might work on the internet, the kind of messages that might work in small ads, and so on and so on. But it all starts with those people.
You know, Gary Halbert once said something that really struck me, and it was this. He says he was talking about the process of crafting a sales letter, and he said the thing that he kept in mind at all times was that a sale is a very fragile thing.
Exactly.
You know,
one of the analogies I use is I say what you're trying to do is you are somebody who is walking silently behind this small creature which is very agile and which could escape very easily, and you've got to grab it without it knowing, yeah? You know, they're very tremulous little creatures, these customers. They're very difficult to grab hold of. Oddly enough, it's funny you should mention Gary Halbert, because the name Gary Halbert was brought to my attention by David Ogilvy in 1985, who sent me one of Gary's newsletters, and he said, what do you think of this? And I said, this guy is fantastic, you know. And the funny thing is, in fact, I'm very sad about this, because Gary sent me an email. We'd never exchanged. I knew he knew about me because he used to tell people, because people told me, you know, that I'd said how wonderful he was. And like the rest of us, he's insecure. And he wrote to me about, 2 weeks before he died, and he said, what are you up to? And I replied to him, and then, so it's a great shame, because he was obviously a very funny man. And as far as I'm concerned, that's another thing where people get it wrong. You've got to have fun. If you don't have fun, as Ogilvy had a wonderful phrase, he said, get rid of dull dogs who spread gloom. You know?
Did you say dull dogs?
Dull dogs who spread gloom. And it's true. I mean, I got on very well with David. We used to have a tremendous laugh. And at the time that I was working with him, one of my jobs was to go around the world preaching the gospel of direct marketing to a largely apathetic audience. and one day he rang me up and he said, Drayton, why do you keep on going around the world giving away all our secrets? I said, David, you know, you've been telling people what to do for 40 years. Nobody listens. But after that, he'd ring me up and he'd say, hello, Drayton, David here. Just back from doing another speech, are we there? He's a very funny man.
Yeah, he must have been remarkable to work with him. Wow.
Well, he certainly didn't want to make any mistakes, I'll tell you that. Because he did not suffer fools gladly.
Well, and there was a guy who took research, you know, the work that you do before you even think about writing a letter. He took research very, very seriously, and even had that training and experience with George Gallup.
It's very interesting that, because for two reasons. Number one is that I used to go and stay at his chateau very, very occasionally, and one evening he spent several hours sitting in his bedroom going through the reports that he did for Gallup and talking to me about his experiences with Gallup. And the other reason is that when O&M bought my business, I came to the attention quite quickly, actually, of the people at the top. They said, will you write a 5-year plan? Well, my idea of a plan is, where are we going to go for lunch, you know? So I'd never written a bloody plan in my life. Okay. And so I asked a lot of people's advice, and eventually I said that somebody once said that every great organisation is the shadow of one great man. I said, so a good place to start with producing a 5-year plan is to ask what you are, just as the same way if you're trying to sell a product, you have to start with what you are, you know. And I said, well, David was an interesting man because his background was research, And then he went into copywriting. He didn't write any copy till he was about 30-odd years old, I think. And I said, so the Ogilvy and Mather Direct, as it was then, I think it's called Ogilvy One now, the thesis upon which the business should be based is that we know more, therefore we can do more, or we can come up with better ideas. And I happen to believe that that is the only basis for success. So going back to your original theme, the basis for success is not knowing about the techniques. The basis for success is knowing about the customers, is knowing about the process of persuasion, is knowing about what tends to work and what doesn't, is knowing what to test and what not to test, all that sort of thing. And I find that, in fact, I was talking to Clayton Makepeace about 3 or 4 months ago, and I was interviewing him and he was interviewing me. I never did anything with the interview. I did with him being totally incompetent. And I said to him, how do you feel about the difference between what you do online and what you do offline? And he simply said, well, the only difference to me, really, he said, we use exactly the same techniques, is that people online expect to get a lot more free stuff, because of the nature of it. Because when you talk to people, not only must you consider who they are and what motivates them, but you must consider their environment. So when somebody is online, the environment is different to when they receive something through the door. Yeah? And there are certain things like spam filters which change the traditional hierarchy of success. I mean, the traditional hierarchy of success, if you want to get people to reply to something in print or on television for that matter, is, number one, a benefit, number two, news, number three, curiosity. But since spam filters make it rather difficult, certainly in cold emails, to use benefits because so many of them are blocked off, which seems to me a shame, then you suddenly, all of a sudden, curiosity, which you've ignored in the past, becomes rather important. So it's quite interesting. So that's to do with the context in which the customer is existing at that point in time. Very important.
You mentioned earlier, we mentioned Gene Schwartz, and I think he was one of the great masters of really studying the context in which an ad would appear. In fact, his book, Breakthrough Advertising, which is kind of a tough book to read. It's very serious, but when you boil it down, it really boils down to that issue. Is okay. You're not just writing an ad that's going to sit on an easel that everybody's going to stand around and admire for hours on end.
So you're writing something that will be looked at for 2 seconds if you can't grab people. And the thing about Gene that I thought was, talking technically as a copywriter, the thing about Gene was the sheer ferocity and momentum of his attack. People talk about compare direct marketing to war. They can compare marketing to war. And quite rightly so. We use very similar phrases like territory and attrition and so on and so on. And the thing is, if you get one of Gene's mailings on the envelope, you get this wholesale assault. You get one big message, rub away stomach flap, and then about 74 other messages on there. And he actually is a superb exponent of something that I often say when I'm teaching people, which is that the world is divided. Well, I always use this joke from Robert Brenchley of the New Yorker, who said the world is divided into two types of people: those who believe the world is divided into two types of people, and those who don't. The first thing you have to realise as a writer is that the world is divided into two types of people: those who are likely to buy or interested to some degree, and those who are not. Forget about the others. And what Gene used to do was go, headlong for the throat of the people who were interested. It's very interesting to compare. There's another guy that I met a few times. In fact, he sent me a nice happy birthday message yesterday, Joe Sugarman. Now, his approach is totally different at first sight, he takes a bit of a chance, you know. He will actually run a headline that is a bit, you know, indirect. He'll just say, this is what it is. It's the phone or whatever, you know. But then once he's got you, if you've read that first sentence, he realises, you know, if you've read that first sentence, you know, then you're in the market, and all he's going to do is try and lead you by the hand. Come on, come with me all the way to the order form, please, you know. That's what's interesting about this business, is that what is essentially quite trivial, which is, you know, parting people from money, can be approached in many different ways, as long as you understand certain enduring truths about what you're doing. And I think people get sidetracked. I think one of the reasons they get sidetracked, by the way, is that there are a great many people around who offer you lots and lots of advice, and I have to say that nearly all of it is good. Yeah, nearly all of it is good. I read all these people, you know. I read Clayton religiously, you know. I read Robert Widower, I read Michelle Forster, and so on and so on. But most of them tend to be dealing in quite technical things to people who haven't grasped the context of what they're doing. Going back to what we're talking about, you know. I cannot think of anybody, you know, who could do better than quite a few of these people on saying to you, this is how you close a deal. This is how you monetize, as they say now, wonderful phrase. This is how you prove the value of what you're talking about. But unless you understand why you're doing what you're doing and what the overall objective is, it's no use knowing, you know, it's no use me knowing how to hit the bullseye as a sharpshooter if I don't even know what a bloody rifle is or where it's used, you know. That's the problem.
Exactly.
That's the real problem.
Exactly.
I've never seen. It's quite interesting. I mean, people are drowning in information about what to do.
You know, I see that every day. The other day, a neighbor who's become interested in internet marketing and somehow vaguely knows I'm involved in it, came over, and he had an Excel spreadsheet where he had identified 257 internet marketing experts who he was tracking their advice simultaneously.
He's mad, you know. I mean, imagine if you let's put this in context. You know, it's always a good thing to say. I always say jokingly to people at a seminar, I say, you'll probably find this hard to believe because you spend a lot of time in meetings, but we're actually in the real world dealing with real people. And imagine if you were trying to learn something, yeah, and every day you went to every day for 12 hours you went to a different teacher, one every hour.
Yeah.
And they might all be very good. You'd be better off actually, rather than going to 50 brilliant teachers, you better go to one teacher who's maybe not as brilliant as some of them, but at least is going to be very consistent, you know, so you know where you're going. It's rather like in fact, going back to my client, LexisNexis, with a lot of the stuff they do is really involved in sifting out for the lawyer on their legal side or the businessman on their business side, sifting out from the absolute mountains of information that pour out every day the things that are relevant to them and their particular problem and making it easy for them to access it. And that's the problem. That if you've got a lot of people offering to help you, where do you start? Start anywhere, but don't start with everyone, is my advice, you know.
Actually suggest a business model for anybody looking for an opportunity. Virtually any product area or any field has this information overload problem. I remember when I was trying to buy my first digital camera. I had the money in my pocket. I was more than ready to spend it, and it took me years, because I'm slow, it took me years to have the confidence to pick one. And I finally found a friend who was a good photographer, and I said, well, what should I get? She told me, and I instantly went out and bought it. But I was literally paralyzed for a couple of years by just the confusion, because there was all the information in the world, and yet there was no information.
And this is true. I mean, again, one of the things that people should be aware of is that people tend to like to cut, you know, it's just human nature to try and categorize things, you know. I mean, what's the difference between men and the animals? I don't know, but one of the differences must be that men have the desire to categorise things. Speech is a form of categorisation. Hot, cold, I'm categorising things. So it is man's nature to want to categorise things. And this can lead to a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Stop categorising and make it simple. One of the things that I think probably, if there is any difference between me and other people, I'm sure there are lots of people who are much better at writing copy than I am, and I'm sure there are lots of people who are much better at just about everything than I am. But I do everything. I write about everything. I try to sell everything. That's been a great help to me, the fact that I've constantly, and one of the reasons why I like this business is, this morning I'm working on a seminar for common marketers. Yeah? Yesterday I was talking about selling something to lawyers. Totally different. And the email I was talking about that produced all the extra money very quickly, that was a fashion chain around the corner from here. It's actually one of the biggest fashion chains in this country. And to me, the great charm of marketing is that you're never bored but I do think if you do nothing else but I'm going to sell information products or I'm going to sell financial products, I'll just go mad. I think, I like to expand my mind a little bit, and I like to learn something every day. And I think if there's one thing I would say to people, for God's sake, don't just think about, going beyond your original thesis, Ken, don't just think about the internet. Don't just think about direct marketing. Don't just think about marketing. You know what? If you think about nothing but marketing, you're going to end up as the most boring person on earth, to yourself and everyone else. Expand your mind. Look outside the narrow parameters you happen to be operating in right now. Because the essence of success, apart from application, is creativity. Creativity comes from taking disparate ideas and putting them together in new and surprising ways. If you don't have many different ideas, you're not going to be all that interesting, If you can't go somewhere unexpected, because the difference between ordinary creative and great creative is quite simply something completely unexpected, but relevant. I got an email this morning from some friends of mine at Mind Valley Labs, and I wrote back and I said, look, that is a great email. And what it referred to, in fact, was he took a well-known headline formula, and then it related it to the Olympics.
Okay.
Because everybody in this country is watching. And it's related in particular to one race where a guy called Michael Phelps, who's English, won. And I thought, there's a guy, that is smart, That is smart. It strikes a chord, it's unexpected, and it's highly relevant,
Perfect formula.
That's what you want. I mean, that's what you want. You want something completely relevant but surprising. But unless you've got enough ammunition in your locker, unless you've got enough going on in your head, unless you're feeding yourself properly, you won't do it. I mean, I read the most bizarre things. I'm reading at the moment a crime novel, and I'm reading Nikolai Gogol, the Russian novelist.
Yeah.
And I've written actually something about Nikolai Gogol on my blog because it suddenly occurred to me it relates to something that interests me. But I wasn't reading Dead Souls thinking I was going to find out something about this particular subject. I was reading Dead Souls by Gogol for interest, and I read this thing. I thought, this relates to something I'm thinking of. And it's this breadth of interest that I think will be of great help to anybody. To me, anyhow. Also, you won't bore yourself to tears.
Yeah, I think the formula you gave of coming up with something relevant but different. Yeah. It's relatively easy to be relevant. It's relatively easy to be different. But either of those elements alone is useless because if you're simply relevant, there's 10,000 other people that are relevant.
Exactly.
So it's not going to break through. And if you're just different, well, if you're different but not relevant, that's pointless. So I'd never thought of those two forces being combined, but that actually is the secret formula, if there is one.
I believe it or not, I'm just out here.
Oh,
I've just gone outside because my daughter, who's actually 12, who lives in America, is over here at the moment, and she's just come here, and I'm going to take her and her little friends out to lunch.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Well, I'd like to tell people how they can follow you more and read more about the things that you've experienced, the things you've thought about. I want to sort of repeat where we started with this call, which is that if you're struggling or if you're doing well and want to do much better, I think the simplest formula for doing that is to, if you're totally focused on technical matters, is to reverse that and start looking at these broader issues of persuasion, direct marketing, and as Drayton points out, that also involves expanding your worldview beyond marketing, which I think is really good advice. And I would change the ratio radically. In other words, if you're spending 10 hours on mastering internet trivia and maybe 1 hour on basic marketing and psychological principles, I'd flip that around. I would spend 10 times as much on those issues.
Absolutely.
And I think Drayton is, I think for those who've listened and know a little bit about direct marketing and heard, really understood the nature of his accomplishment, basically taking over the UK direct marketing marketplace, working directly with David Ogilvy, working with people like Gene Schwartz. You're not going to find anybody walking around who has a deeper and broader experience in the world of direct marketing these days. It's just not findable. I want to give people some suggestions on how they can get read more of what you have to say and go deeper into this. I think Drayton would be an excellent, for those of you who are new to direct marketing, Drayton would be an excellent gateway into the field. For those of you that are already advocates of direct marketing and don't need any persuasion, this is somebody whose work you really will enjoy a great deal. So the first thing you can do for everyone, which is absolutely free, is simply go to DraytonBird.com.
www.draytonbird.com.
Exactly, and Drayton is spelled Drayton, and Bird is spelled B-I-R-D. So that's DraytonBird, www.draytonbird.com. There's some great stuff on there. There's your 7 deadly sins. There's your 51 helpful direct marketing ideas, and literally we could have spent an hour on each one of those ideas. They're so important. Drayton also has 171 question and answers about basic marketing and direct marketing issues. There's case studies, reports, articles, podcasts, videos, all kinds of fantastic stuff, all free. I can't recommend it highly enough. Now, Drayton, you have 2 books available that I see, currently available.
Well, there's 3, but the one, actually, the world is a funny place. There's one called Common Sense Direct and Interactive Marketing, which has actually, in this market, been the bestseller for 26 years. The only problem is every 2 years I have to revise it because the business gets more complicated.
Yeah.
That's on Amazon, and also there's How to Write a Sales Letter That Sells. Again, that's on Amazon. Or actually, if you go onto my website, you can get it from me directly. And if you're very nice, I'll sign it for you. There's another book which is just for people who are interested in stupid things in marketing, which is called Marketing Insights and Outrages. And that, the funny thing about this book, it's just been published in Beijing. I think my books are out in 17 languages, and I do not understand why they published it in Beijing. I really don't, because it's the least relevant, because it's full of, one of my friends who was the former creative director of Ogilvy and Mather in New York read it, and he said it's the first time I've fallen off my chair laughing. So it's about stupid things that people do, and obviously every one of them is designed to teach a lesson, but I'm not sure they'll go that down well in Beijing.
Right. So if people
actually, you're talking about Gary Bencivenga.
Yep.
Gary said that that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about the Common Sense Direct and Interactive. He said it's way up there with Caples and Ogilvy and this, that, and the other. One of my treasures, he says. So
I read that book. I'll never forget. It was the New York Public Library, the main branch on Fifth Avenue. The book must have been relatively new at the time. I'd been actually doing direct marketing, but not realizing that there was a thing called direct marketing. In other words, I was obsessed with headlines. I was obsessed with tracking. I was obsessed with following up. I was obsessed with making my copy as effective as possible. But I didn't realize there was a science to it. And it was slowly dawning on me that, in fact, there were other people that had walked this path. And I was reading some of the books and having a little difficulty getting traction. In other words, the books were a bit technical. They were good. Yeah. But it made it feel like this was a distant thing that maybe I could never learn. But I sat down and I found your book in the library, and this was a time when that was the only place I was ever going to be able to get a book, because I was very new to the whole thing, didn't have a penny. And there your book was in the New York Public Library, and I read it, and I remember the feeling of like, oh, I could actually do this.
Well, I have a joke that I tell when I'm doing seminars, and I say that my secret weapon is stupidity, and people look at me and say, well, and I say, well, I've done a lot of research into audiences around the world, and I've discovered that there are more stupid people than clever people, and their money looks just the same. So, so I always write for the stupid people, and I'm a bit stupid actually. It takes me quite a long time to understand it, but as I always say to my clients, when I understand it, I can explain it to anyone.
Gotcha.
And that's the trick,
Gotcha. Well, these books are, there's the website, www.draytonbird.com. There are the books, Common Sense, Direct and Digital Marketing, and then some other books, Marketing Insights and Outrages, and How to Write a Sales Letter, which I believe people can get from your website.
Yeah.
And then for those who might find themselves in London in November, this will be November 15th and 16th. I'm going to be doing a 2-day system intensive. This is a follow-up to the series that I did in the United States last year. I visited 6 cities and really worked this material and really worked with hundreds of students. And I've got it to a point that it's shining, And I'm only going to do it once this year, and it's going to be in London. And I took a risk and a chance, and I thought, gee, I wonder if I could persuade Drayton Bird to come by and maybe participate a little bit and say a few words, and not thinking whatever happened, but I thought I'd try. And lo and behold, he said yes. So if you are thinking of attending the system intensive in London in November, one of the bonuses will be that Drayton will actually be there for a while at least, and is going to talk with us.
I'll be there all the time if I can be, because I'm hoping to pick up some ideas. A valuable commodity, which there are never enough of.
Well, and exactly, and that kind of, maybe this is a good place to end the call. This is really a business about generating and testing ideas more than anything else.
Absolutely.
And if you can do that, the technical issues are trivial. If you can't generate and test ideas, all the technical knowledge in the world just won't help you unless you want to sell yourself as a technician, which is perfectly fine. But for those who may be interested in coming to London, and by the way, for Americans, I noticed the dollar is strengthening against the pound. This maybe your chance to go to London
for slightly less.
Slightly less.
People love it here, though. I don't understand it myself because I live here, but I'm thinking of emigrating.
Yeah. So you can go to systemintensive.com, and that's where you'll find all the information about this intensive that I'm giving. Drayton, wow, thank you so much. For me, it's a beautiful completion of a circle that began many years ago when I found and was inspired by your book in the library, and it's great to realize that you knew Gene and to hear your stories about working with David Ogilvy, who certainly inspired me a lot as well. And we'll see you in London. And again, everybody, for God's sake, go to DraytonBird.com, www.DraytonBird.com. and either begin or further your understanding of direct marketing and persuasion. You won't find a better source.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, everyone. Ciao, ciao.
Yes. Great. And enjoy your lunch.
Enjoy my lunch, yeah. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.